So I've been asked to do a quick breakdown of this kind of cute little set that I created. This was, inspired by one of those nice little drawings that you see on Pinterest, and I've gone different directions. It's, it was a little dock with some ropes and whatnot. So I took it into this nice little scene. And so, sharks no fishing. And obviously, there's a boot down here, and the guy's been dragged into the water by the shark. So, anyways, how did I put this together and how did I build it so fast? Let's take a look at the dock to start with. This is the piece that I began with. I've been doing polymodeling on this as opposed to just all procedural, but I've been starting a lot of procedural stuff now. One of the things I've done here, just to note, is I've left my edit polys in the stack in case I want to go back and edit them. In a lot of cases, I won't do this because it is much slower to work with edit polys, but some of these edits are very small. Other times I've left them specifically so that I could show off the sort of order that I did things in. Now with this, we've got just a board, and it is a simple board that we've started with, and it was a box initially. I've done some chamfering and some cuts on it and broken it up into a box. Now the other thing I did is I made sure the pivot was in the middle of the box, because when you make a box, it's not. So I centered the pivot and in the settings here, and I went to center pivot and I centered the pivot, and then I made sure I reset X form and I collapsed it back down again, so I had a pivot centered. Reason the pivot centered: array modifier. So the array modifier is arraying it out. I'm just going to turn that off. I don't know why that suddenly changed, but hopefully it hasn't blown things up. So I've arrayed it out, and the reason the pivot's centered is I wanted to be able to random increment rotations around at 180 degrees, flip them back and forward, create a dock that looks unique, even though it's not. It's the same piece over and over again. Threw a bit of noise on it just to kind of wobble it up a little bit, threw a bend on it just to make the boards look old and saggy, chamfered it and played with the chamfer settings a little bit so that it's only chamfering just to segments of one, just to knock the corners off, get nice little highlights on things. As soon as you do that, though, I've discussed this in other videos, what you end up with is a very soft looking top. And so if I just turn off the display selected with edge faces, you can see it looks very soft and gushy. It's not so bad, it looks kind of cartoony, but if you go to the weighted normals, it'll flatten it back out again. And again, I think I've got explanations in other videos what weighted normals does. I then booleaned some chunks out of it so that it's got some pieces, missing out of it. And hopefully I didn't just blow up this edit poly. Looks like I did. So what I did with the edit poly then is I dropped one on top. And this is the problem with putting edit polys on top of things, by the way. You can blow stuff up pretty quick. If you go to the bottom of the stack anyways and start to make changes to it that affect the top of the stack, you can have problems arise. So what I did is that I just kind of broke this up a little bit and rotated these pieces and set them back on the dock. So the final result is a dock that's been, broken up. Now again, that Boolean modifier was kind of neat because all I had were a couple of boxes in here that had a bunch of noise and polygons in them, and I was able to create holes in my dock really quickly just by crunching them up a little bit. So on to some other pieces, this is just real simple. It is, just a box, a little bit of noise to wobble it up a little bit. I could do some, poly edits in here and give it a little more cracking and whatnot. Just haven't done it on this piece with, again, a chamfer breaking things down. Post, pretty simple. It is, a cylinder, and that cylinder then has been tapered, chamfered a little bit, another taper again to get another angle on it. And edit poly, again, just to wobble it up a little bit and knock in some, small edits for cracks and everything. Array modifier to get to all of them. And I used the weighted normals to flatten off some of it. Again, I'm not sure I really needed it on that piece, but, I threw it on there. And so that's the dock piece. That was really, simple to throw together and really quick to make. The next piece I went to was the water here. And the water is really cool because it's 100% procedural. What we've got then is we have a box. I have no height segments in it, didn't need it, but there's lots of segments, across it, in width and length, and tapered it. So it tapered, moved the center of the taper around so that you get the centering, or the center, sorry, so that it tapers in the right spot. So I move that center point around, and then a volume select, and the volume select is set to vertex and box, just selecting the top vertices. Okay. Wave, and get it waving a little bit, and I actually copied the controller from one to the other here so that they remain the same. If you just right click on it and say copy controller, and then right click again and say paste instance controller, you can lock two spinners together. Next one is a volume select again. This time another box, another vertex, but with a soft selection, and it's designed just to start clipping the tops of the waveforms off. Then an X form, and in the X form, a wave shouldn't just be an even, it should be, sort of steeper on the front faces of it. So I took the X form, and I was able to just move those vertices forward so that you get this nice sort of feeling of it sliding forward. Then a noise modifier, just to get the top edges of the waves, sort of breaking them up a little bit more. Another volume select. This one's just designed to clip it a little bit with another soft select, because I needed some other settings to pass up to the ripple modifiers. So you can see now that I have a ripple in here. And the ripple modifier, same thing. The amplitudes are, the controllers are instanced. Play around with your wavelength, and then a bit of decay. So if you don't have any decay, it just keeps going out all the way and it looks really silly. But so, I decayed it a little bit, and then I simply copied it over for the other post and changed up the phase a touch. So we had two different ones. And the poly select wasn't needed, so I turned it off, and I went to chamfer just to round off the edges. So I got nice lighting, going on this piece. And I guess I could even pull that down a little bit more to get that edge rounded off, and it might give me a bit nicer lighting, essentially. Now, the reason this isn't being affected by vertex selections is I have the selection set to all edges, and that allows me to not have to deal with an edit poly to turn off the selection. So, from there I needed a ground, and so I needed the underneath those ripples that happen in sand. That was obviously pretty simple: plane, wave, noise, slice, and the slice is there just to slice this front edge off. It was sticking out because the noise is rippling along the this axis here, and so it was clipping out. So I stuck a slice plane just to stop it from doing that, to clean it up a little bit. Ground, very similar as the water, but obviously not see-through. So a box volume and whatnot, and just played around with some settings and got the ground in there and stuffed that into it. So the wood crates, there's actual tutorial for it. So I won't cover them in great detail, but it is essentially only one face of it, an array, or again, you can use symmetry that I use in my tutorial, an array modifier again, weld it and chamfer it, and we're good to go. We've got boxes, and I copied those around. The barrel, super simple on the barrel. Go down to the bottom of the stack here. I'll just isolate it, turn off show end result, and I'll have to show the or turn off my filter for non-renderable. So it started life as a rectangle. Cut the rectangle in half both ways. I've actually used an X form on it to scale it up because I realized it was a little small. Spline mirror to mirror the top and bottom together, and then a lathe. That was it. I mean, it's a handful of knots. I mean, you really can't get simpler than that. There's no reason to do anything more complicated than that. The wood posts we'll take a look at next. They were, again, pretty simple, and did some poly modeling on it. Looks like I still have a modifier in there from doing something else, but what you'll see is it's just a box. It's an edit poly with a bunch of chamfers and cuts in it, just busting it up so it looks more like a piece of wood. Taper modifier to make it look a little cartoonier. I chamfered it off a little bit, and again, I played with the chamfer settings so it's not chamfering too much. Go and play with your min angles here, and again, segments down to 0 so we don't get rounded corners, just chamfering them off, and then a bend. And it's instanced the other side over here, so that we have one on the other side. The line is pretty simple. That is literally a line. It has 3 knots in it. I, set them at both ends, and then you're good to go. It looks like I've lost my knot down here on the end somewhere. It's probably buried in the middle of 000, because I accidentally put an edit poly on top of this, and I think it killed the path constraint. So anyways, it's there, so I got to get the knots back. The ropes at the ends are actually just circles with converted to an edible spline. And if you take a circle with 4 knots and you change all the knots to smooth, it comes out a little more rectangly. So I just left it like that and then stuck an array modifier on it and made 3 copies of it, in the Z, and it looks like it's wrapped around good enough. Same thing here. We got these little knots that are they should be on path constraints on the path. And again, I'm not sure why there's not ones on the ends there when there should have been, but there aren't. Sign, same sort of thing. It's just, I did some Booleans for the holes, but, it started life as a box with some edits in it and no problem at all. So a couple other things that I worked on that were nice is this piece of rope here. So this was kind of fun. If you notice, it has quite the stack on it, but it started life as a freehand, just up in the air. So it's a freehand spline, and it's got a couple of knots on path constraints stuck on the end. I then did a normalized spline, and so I normalized it and gave it a whole lot of segments so that I could throw a conform on it, and I conformed it. Now, when I conformed it down, I made sure I conformed it down using, some stand-in objects. I think it's one of these. There you go. I used another plane here because I was falling through the cracks and I needed something that was sort of closely approximated. So I actually used a plane and did a conform, and it looks like I did a second conform on top of it and got it to conform. You can relax it. Looks like I've got that turned off. The idea being is when I went and did the conform here, I needed to collide with this object here, and I needed to collide with the barrel, and I collided with the ground under the water. Okay, so I've got several of them here, and you can see deck boards didn't work, so I had it turned off. This stretched some of the vertices, so a normalized spline to even that back out again. So I could throw a spline relax on it, and that spline relax is just kind of, taking some of the corners out of things and whatnot and breaking it up a little bit. And because there's lots of verts in it now with the normalized spline and they're all even, the spline overlap is then giving me the overlaps on everything. So you can see I'm getting nice overlaps. So that's beautiful. It just handled it all by itself. Perfect. And then normalized spline, yet again, this one was to reduce the vertex count because I needed a few edits. When we took a look at it, it wasn't quite what I wanted, and so I did some spline edits here just to mix it up and make it look a little better. It looks like I may have opened the wrong file because some of those edits are lost there, but I'm going to have to go back and bring those back in. Normalize spline again, this time just to even out the poly count for the renderable spline, so it renders nice and even and gives me these nice even polygons all the way around. So that was pretty simple. It's projected down there. If I move it around, it'll actually reproject itself and change shape and form as I move it around, which is really kind of funky and cool when you can get it to do that. It's the conform modifier is excellent for being able to save yourself a lot of time. And if you notice, the overlaps remain and all that sort of stuff. Now I've got one more that was kind of fun. Well, I guess a couple of them. They're both done similarly. This one wasn't done with a cloth simulation. This one was. So I actually have a couple things going on here. I have the cloth sim object, which is, colliding with this stand-in box object. It was just a copy of it. It was pushed out a little bit, copy of the post, but I wanted it nice and simplified. And I had to put it in this little tube to replicate the line. It wasn't hitting the line because the line was a little too small, I guess, not enough polys in it. So I just threw that in there to be able to give me something to collide with. And I could sim that. Now, the not sim is literally a copy of the plane, but you can see with less segments in it. So it's got a whole lot less segments in it. And it's skin wrapped to the cloth sim object. And it has, then there's a not, which has an array, and it's on surface at vertices. And it is using that object. So it's placing those knots based on all of the vertices in it. The next part is the actual uh, net part of it. So this part was an edit spline. I stole basically the splines out of the knot, the one that the knots are on, with an edit poly modifier that I deleted. And I stole the splines, attached the two sets together because they're all either the ones going across or the ones going down it, and and then I could go ahead and skin wrap the spline to the cloth sim. That way, I can then put renderable spline above it, and my ropes don't get ripped and torn by the simulation. They retain their shape because we're simming it before they become renderable. So that is really nice. And then just simmed it, dropped it in place, and I set everything to non-rendering. So when I turn on my filter in the viewport, all those pieces vanish. This one was very similar, except in this case I used a lattice on a reference of the piece that is being, you call it simmed, but it really wasn't being simmed. It is just the net reference that's here. And this net reference, in a poly modeling, I just poly modeled it to sit exactly where I wanted it. You could have run a sim on it, but it was probably going to be more of a headache running a sim on it than it was to do, just a big freeform tool. So I grabbed the freeform, grab brush, and I was able to just, push and pull it around so it fits a little bit better or whatever, and makes it look like it hanging there. And again, same thing. We got some circles with an array modifier to make it look like it's tied up. And, that's the scene. It's pretty simple. I managed to put it together very quickly. And then of course, just some in viewport, bloom to make it bloom up nicely, and get it to look kind of cool. And there you go. There's the end result.